Hey, so this is Colleen's Cold War podcast, episode 1, and today we're going to be talking about a lot of things revolving around the shift in foreign policy, and I have Logan with me here today. If you want to
Hi,
say.
I'm Logan.
And we're just going to be talking about some things that were kind of important and essential to the Cold War and how it shaped U.S. foreign policy even today. So how do you think that nuclear weapons affected the Cold War?
I think they affected the Cold War in a really interesting way. We saw them used at the end of World War II, and that kind of set a tone for a lot of countries. Like, nobody wanted that to be used against them, and for Russia, it motivated them to get weapons of the same caliber, because if you don't want to be held hostage kind of at that point, and after that point, there was kind of a mutually assured destruction type of relationship where Russia and the U.S. wouldn't directly go to conflict with each other, and so
it was kind of like this competition, like who had the biggest, it was like, It's like this, like, I got this, no, I'm going to trump you over and get this, and no, I'm going to come, and just this constant battle of just better until we get to this.
Yeah, they even went to the moon.
I mean, that's...
But that's not, nuclear stuff, but...
But I mean, it was it was this constant, everything was a competition during the Cold War. And I think it's important to look at, these weapons of mass destruction, whether they're right or wrong, because, it's, we took it from, war, yes, weapons are bad, but these nuclear weapons could just take out so many people at once, and just with the drop of a bomb.
Yeah, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I think they were both 70,000 and 80,000 people immediately just gone, and that is a terrifying thing to think of.
I think of it's almost kind of like a snap, you're living your life one moment and then the next it's bam,
Yeah. It's I don't even know.
But that we have the power to and thinking about today,
almost playing God.
Yeah, but we have this power to do it. I just think, and now at this point, and during the Cold War, all these countries had these variations of nuclear warfare, and we were the only ones to use it really in a large scale.
Yeah, we were.
And, and I try to think, did this help us really avoid conflict? Because, the Truman Doctrine, it was that first step that allowed the U.S. to get involved. Because before, we wanted to stay away from, in World War I and World War II, we were kind of late to the game,
Yeah, we were more isolationist, especially immediately following World War I. We saw a lot of people come in injured and deformed from war and sick, and nobody wanted to go back to that. But then after Pearl Harbor, we got involved in World War II, and we sort of got involved in an arms race with the Cold War.
I think when it got brought to our soil, it changed the game, because we saw with Pearl Harbor and with 9/11 that really, those two events really shaped our foreign policy and how we were going to deal with other countries, because it wasn't, because before that, to say that we've only had these 2 attacks on U.S. soil when other countries have had countless attacks, and everything's really focused on the other side of the world, and we're just kind of over here chilling.
Yeah, we kind of almost play...
Sorry, a global policeman, sort of, over the whole world.
Yeah, I almost sneezed. My bad. We kind of play the global police, and I don't necessarily think that's a good thing, because you see after 9/11, just with the Truman Doctrine back then, under George W. Bush, where we can kind of just go into countries just because we claim that they might not be friendly, or they might have like weapons that we have, but we just don't want them to have.
No, and I think that's really important, because I think it's, like, we're all kind of scared, like, I think that we see a lot of like fear, and I think that was kind of what prompted like a lot of like the wars and the Cold War, is that we were fearful of these other countries. So instead of letting it happen over there, we put ourselves in the situation so we could have the control over. So we're kind of like the boss of these like countries, and we wanted to like have this idea and like this plan for these countries that we were in charge of, not them.
Yeah. It's weird, and like both factions kind of had that. But it's weird to see us still kind of do it now today. With us.
I mean, we're still over. We're still over. I mean, we still have troops all over the world.
Stage coups. We still like put governments in support of the U.S. in place in other countries, like to this day.
And I think like looking at like China, in between like World War II, like right after that, we went into like this Cold War, and then they went into like, they had this whole like civil war going on over there.
Yeah.
That we were really worried about like the Soviet Union and like Russia, when they're having this civil war between the Chinese Communist Party and the Nationalist Party. And, they'd been dealing with this communism that we were scared of. Just at the start of the Cold War was when we really started to have this like of the Red Scare. But in 1921 was when they started having this communist sort of run country.
Yeah.
And I think that led to a lot of like corruption, and I think that played a lot with like global tensions between China and other countries.
Yeah, I think the problem when it comes to countries and corruption is when like centralized power can be good, but when you centralize it too far and then it becomes authoritarian, it becomes a problem. And that was a big issue with the communist parties in both Soviet Russia and China.
And I think in China, they were kind of like that second, like they kind of came into this like kind of like, because they, we were really like focused on Russia, Soviet Union, like that was where we were kind of focusing a lot of like our energy and our power. And then, when China, gets, Mao Zedong in charge, and they have the communist Chinese Revolution, this balance of power, and China becomes one of the largest socialist states. And so now it's the Soviets, the U.S., and China, not the Soviet, the U.S., and then all these other little countries. We have this third huge party that comes in and interrupts our Cold War.
Yeah, well, and honestly, at that point, we also had like Britain too, which military power-wise, I would say, I don't know if they would be as big as China in terms of manpower straight up, but they were both, well, the UK not so much, I guess, not emerging any longer as like a world power, but China was beginning to emerge as world power, and I would say they were like at comparable levels of strength to each other almost.
And I think that, especially like, because, China had been having these communist influences for so long, they were already pretty secretive at that point,
Yeah.
They weren't, they were already kind of in that formula, we weren't really going to stop the spread of communism in China because it was already there.
The people decided what they wanted. They had a people's revolution where they overthrew the government. It wasn't even, I don't know if there was Soviet play involved in the overthrow of
I think
Chinese
in China
government.
they were just, it was kind of, I think China kind of crumpled within itself.
Yeah, because I think there was a big wealth disparity there.
And I think there was a big, a big power struggle between the government in China and like the people within the government, and I think it all just kind of caused like mass chaos that nobody was happy.
Yeah.
And then we see where they ended up. I mean.
Yeah, violent revolution overthrows the government.
And I think that like in what you were saying about like the Soviets influencing China, we talk about like this domino theory that it happens in one country, okay, it happens in the next, and I think and we saw with like Alexander the Great, he took over one country at the next, and he just wanted you just want to keep going.
Yeah.
And I think we were scared of that in the U.S. happening in other countries.
Yeah, and I think we're still kind of scared today of the influence of like other ideas other than like our systems that we have now. Like we can still see that we have like an embargo on Cuba, who is like the only real socialist state in the world, or socialist country in the world, and they're like 90 miles off the border of us, and we're just like
we're really scared of Cuba. Like Cuba's like not like comparable to like the size of like China. Yeah. Like we're like really scared of Cuba.
We're terrified of them.
And it's like you can stand down in Key West at that spot, and you can look and see like Cuba off in the distance, and it's like like what's stopping them from like driving a boat over into Florida and being like, hey, what's up?
And nowadays they're like not even really interested, because like Cuba has no interest in a war with like the U.S. because that would just be suicide. I feel like
that's kind of how it is for like a lot of countries. Like
yeah, I feel like now it's just they just want to do their thing, and we're just like no, that we don't want to let people know that this might be a system that could work.
And I mean, like thinking about like Guantanamo Bay, like it's down in
we
had like U.S. people down in how scared we are of them, but yeah, that's where we send like the world's most like criminals that the United States like persecutes. Yeah. That's where we put them. That's where we send all the terrorists, is to Gitmo.
Yeah, and the funny thing about Guantanamo Bay is like Guantanamo Bay was like a big shipping port for like Cubans, and we like annexed it, and we're like actually torture site.
It's gonna be like a shipping point for terrorists and people that like destroy nations.
Yeah.
And I think that like looking like at the Marshall Plan, like I think in what you said about shipping ports, the Marshall Plan like shifted that we wanted American goods, from the U.S., homegrown, like made in America, and I think that played a huge role in our tensions with other countries and our relationships, because at this point, we weren't wanting to get stuff from other countries, because who knows what they have, and who knows their ties with communist countries.
Yeah, we were cutting off trade from other countries and hurting their economies, and that caused a lot of dismay, I guess.
I would agree, and I think, but I think like now looking at it, we're kind of going back to that idea, kind of more of an American-made thing, because, we had it, and it was so strong during this time, but then over the years, it changed, because, I mean, like, you look at most things now, you look on the bottom and they say made in China, made in Taiwan, made in Japan, but I think now, and like they were talking about, like, the ban of TikTok, is a Chinese-owned company, and I think, just, like, trying to, like, get everything into America, because, if it's in America, it's not bad.
Yeah, it couldn't be.
It's American. It's American made, and it's like but if it comes from another country, if it's cheap and we're getting it, it's like fine.
Yeah.
But if it's something that like everybody's enjoying, they're like, no, can't have that.
Yeah, no.
And
and I think again, like with the ban on TikTok, it has something to do with like being afraid of like different ideas, or like new or revolutionary ideas, because that is where this is a bit of a theory here, I guess, but you see, if you look up France and like on TikTok versus like on any other social media platform, you see France protests on TikTok, but on other social media platforms you don't see that. You see like pictures of the Eiffel Tower still.
You know, like people like traveling, not
Yeah.
not what's going on with like these countries and their
Yeah.
governments.
You don't really get the they don't want you to see like the messages, I feel like, of like revolutionary ideas, like, because they know that some of the
It's
things they're
spread.
doing are like the same things that are causing other countries to like.
It goes back to that domino effect, you know. It just kind of, you see this group of people, protesting, causing this big revolution, and other countries start to realize, our country's not perfect,
Yeah.
but we see this other country doing this, so maybe if we did that too, our country
Yeah.
would get better. Like there's this, but they're all kind of just doing it,
Yeah,
at
and
the same.
None of these countries were perfect because like a lot of them were like created out of like sort of accelerationism, like those communist countries, because with like authoritarian like centralized governments, because it was like a violent revolution.
And
that,
it was like
came
you
to
got
fruition.
out. If you
Yeah.
it was a quick, like, you were either there or you were gone,
Yeah.
and if you stayed, you're kind of stuck there.
Yeah. And so it was kind of, I think, from that sense, almost doomed from the start. Like, I don't know. I think it's possible to have, I guess, a revolution and have a government in place, like a good government in place afterwards. But I think it's hard to repair the social fabric there,
And
too,
I think
and it causes issues.
And I think it depends on the type of government
Yeah.
that you have, and not saying that our government's not set up for that, but like these totalitarian like governments, they're not really set up to voice the people, like
Yeah.
in our democracy and like in other democracies, it's more set up to like employ the voices of people, but it's only to a certain extent,
Yeah, it's like it's a republic versus like a full on like direct democracy, and I think over there the problem was, I guess, when they started moving away from like democracy too, and I don't think it's like I also think it's interesting, I guess, the way it's framed, where like it's communism versus democracy, because I don't think they're exclusively like against each other. I think you could have a democracy with communism. I just think like we happen to see some authoritarian.
And I think we
states.
we see the parts of communism, not saying that communism is good in any means, but I think we see these parts of communism that are, we're seeing this bit, the big things that are happening, maybe not like the other things that are happening, there are bad things that happen in communist countries, but but the good things happening in those countries could not be happening in ours. Like where we're failing, they might be succeeding, and when we're succeeding, they might be failing, and it's kind of valuing one or over the other.
Yeah, and I think it really just like is important to, like, I think democracy is the important foundation in like a good government structure. I think like, well, I don't know if a direct democracy would be like the best thing ever. I think like the further you are on the side of democracy, the more like you can get away from having like a tyrannical government, or like a government where it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing for you.
No.
And I think that was like a really large issue with those communist countries, is that they were just all mostly authoritarian in nature.
And just not for the people.
Yeah.
No.
But
people don't like being told what to do.
yeah, and like it's like Cuba today isn't like a communist country. It's, people would refer to it as like socialist, and they are like, actually I don't know if Cuba's a great example, but like when everyone talks about Venezuela and how their dollar like went down, that was a lot of U.S. involvement there, but they had like a direct democracy there where they would have everyone like go and vote on the issues like directly, and they like developed a socialist government, and then we were just like.
So it all kind of like plays, it kind of all just like comes together, and that'll lead us into our next episode that talks about power struggles and this competition among the superpowers. So this is Coleen, and we will see you in a couple of minutes.